Hello ladies and gentlemen, Nick here, and for the first time I am reviewing books. That's right, I've done film and TV, I've even dabbled in audio on the Universals, and maybe I might do some audios on my main channels, main and retro channels. But today I am starting books, starting with I decided all my content on the main channel is going to be a 2015 onward stuff, as that's when I set it up. Unless otherwise said, so special ones. Maybe films I saw at the cinema pre-2015, but only cinema ones, like Frozen or Wallace and Gromit in the Curse of the Rare Rabbit or Fury Vengeance. I wonder if anyone remembers that film. And the other channel, the retro channel, will be pre-2015 stuff, as well as 2015 onward stuff, that films that I don't see in the cinema. So today on the Retro channel, I'm reviewing a book from 2014, and ironically, it's a Doctor Who book. But this is no ordinary Doctor Who book. It's a fictional Doctor Who story, but it's no ordinary fictional story. This is the one and only War Doctor fictional book. This is the one War Doctor novel, and one of only 13 non-comic book and non-TV 13 War Doctor stories. So when I say that, this is his books and his audios. There's 12 audios and 4 box sets, 3 per box set that I've got to get at some point when I get more money. Someone give me a job, please. Preferably in the Bishop Stortford area, or Harlow, or Cambridge, or London. Or somewhere on the West Anglia main line. So anyway, but those and this, and then everything else is comic books. Not comics, comics, or his few TV adventures. So, The War Doctor, Engines of War by George Mann, released in 2014, so it actually came quite quickly after Day of the Doctor, which was 2013, so George Mann must have gotten onto the project quite early into 2014, or very late 2013, as Day of the Doctor was November, and I think this one came out September, October 14, so he wrote it quite within a couple of months, and I have to say, early on the story, it starts off slow, but also quite interesting. It's split into 3 parts. Part 1, Moldox, which is where the Doctor goes to in the early half of the story, early third, I should say, in the story, and it's in chapter 2 we get to see the Doctor fighting a battle with the Daleks, and then he's crash lands onto Moldox after it goes horribly wrong, where he meets our second main character of the book, the new companion, Cinder, who we meet in the first chapter, and they discover the Daleks are teaming up together. They discover Daleks doing some nasty experiments. They've created new weapons, and they're testing this new weapon that will erase people from time. I wonder if Big Finish took some inspiration from this book, as it uses quite a lot of the war. It's not just fighting, it's also got some using time as an advantage and the time weapons. But as well as that, they also discovered that there's this big whopping weapon that's going to erase Gallifrey from existence and the Time Lords. So the Doctor and Cinder, who wants a way off Moldox, have to go and warn Gallifrey. And this leads us into part 2, which is Gallifrey, where the Doctor's manages to convince the Time Lords of this weapon. However, their plan to stop it is to basically destroy the entire galaxy around the eye of something. The Tantalus Eye. But the Time Lords plan to launch a weapon into it which would destroy the whole galaxies as well as the Daleks. And they don't care. The Doctor realises that they've become as bad as the Daleks. So in an attempt to stop them, he and Cinder become the enemies of the Time Lords, and eventually have to escape Gallifrey and go become rogue agents, I suppose, and try and stop the tear from the weapon known as the Tear from being deployed. Don't know if that's its actual name, but anyway. Meanwhile, there's this other Time Lord called Karlax, who really hates the Doctor for no reason in particular. It just says the Karlax hates the Doctor for some reason. Yeah, that's one thing with Karlax's character. He hates the Doctor, but we don't know why. What was it? His old rivalry? Does he not agree with the Doctor's points? Is he jealous? I don't know what it is. I don't know. And he really wants to be Rassilon, the Time Lord President's #1 top dog. Karlox isn't a really nice character. Even when he regenerates, he's still a prick. And possibly even worse. But in part 3, Into the Eye, the Doctor and Cinder first have to stop the tear being used on the eye, and then later have to find a way to destroy the Daleks and stop them once and for all. And they, using Barusa, who Rassilon brought back, basically after the 5 Doctors and the novel The 8 Doctors, Rassilon brought back Barusa out of his internal use of the being in part of a slab. He did this in the 8 Doctors as well, temporarily, but this time he's being used to, in 8 Doctors it was to sort out a mess caused by the events of Trial of a Time Lord, but this time he's being used as a possibility engine, which would help the Time Lords determine what fate would bestow them. And Barusa, I think he's aware of the Doctor's actions that's going to happen at the end of the Time War, but eventually it's him that is what's needed to destroy the Daleks without having to use the tear in the eye. And eventually the Doctor saves the day. However, Karlax, newly regenerated, because Karlax was caught in a battle with the Daleks, but he was saved by the Doctor and Cinder, and he had to regenerate. The new Karlax later attempts to kill the Doctor and manages to get Cinder, who then promptly dies. The Doctor, of course, leaves Karlax to be exterminated by the Daleks for punishment. Well, Karlax, if you would be such a cold-hearted bastard, the Doctor wouldn't leave you to the mercy of the most terrible creatures in the universe. Yeah, you really ought to have learned. Cinder sadly dies, though, so the Doctor has to bury her on her home planet, and his quote, the final line is "no more." This implies this is going to take place just before the Day of the Doctor. And you know what? This could potentially be the story that takes place before Day of the Doctor. It could be. I mean, I haven't really heard the audios yet, but considering that they were planning another 4 box sets for the War Doctor before John Hurt passed away, and those stories had to be incorporated as 8th Doctor prequels, alongside the ones that they were planning for a box set, and now the 8th Doctor's got 4 prequel box sets of 4 stories, and his last one for box set 1 was probably been pushed back to box set 4, if that's going to tie in with Night of the Doctor. Then, yeah, that makes sense. Big Finish would probably have tied in with Day of the Doctor, with the War Doctor, until box sets 5 to 8 were cancelled due to the death of John Hurt, and now they didn't seem to have the right to making any more War Doctor stories. They can't even do short trips, or Companion Chronicles, or Doctor Chronicles. The War Doctor is now out of bounds for Big Finish, with the exception of those 4 box sets, for some reason. I don't know, maybe rights-ish from the BBC, I guess. The good news is they are allowed to make audios for every other Doctor up to Peter Capaldi. Not Jodie Whittaker just yet, but the 12th Doctor has recently had the rights to the 12th Doctor, and new series characters up to Twice Upon a Time have been allowed. So Big Finish fans, you'll get 12 Doctors alongside the War Doctor, and you might get more. You might get more later on. Although not all the actors are at Big Finish. Some of them are dead. Some of them don't quite have the time, or just haven't joined yet. Anyway, so back to the book. I think the book is a good story. I think it's a really interesting experience. I think the first third is the best, where the Doctor and Cinder are investigating a mystery on the planet. It is a bit of a slow-paced bit, but it gets interesting. When we get to Gallifrey, things kind of fall down. I don't mind seeing the Time Lords being seen as bad guys just as much as the Daleks, and being almost, if not just as bad, or even worse than the Daleks. But I think it's done a little too much, and the Time Lords basically just ignoring the Doctor's warnings about what they will do if they deploy the tear. They don't care, basically. And I kind of got a bit frustrated and annoyed. I can understand the story angle, but I just got frustrated and annoyed. And I'm reading Scratchman as well, Tom Baker, it's over there, and it looks like he's in trouble with the Time Lords as well. Time Lords, will you just wake up and realise the Doctor is your saviour, not your enemy? Jesus Christ. Dave the Doctor should have fixed that, but Hellbent took it on its head and then dropped it. So, yeah, you know what? I don't think there's been that many times where the Doctor's been seen as a hero. Maybe a few. Maybe it takes him a story or two to see that, like Deadly Assassin, A Measure of Time, Five Doctors, and Dave the Doctor, parts of Hellbent. But other times he's just been. Maybe sometimes they get him to do some of their stuff off world, like in Genesis of the Daleks, for example. Three Doctors, I think he's seen as a hero by the Time Lords when the day's saved. But most of the time they just treat him really badly, and not just because he breaks all the laws. They just don't like him, even though he saves them countless times alongside many others. I feel though this time round it is because they are during the war and they're becoming bad, so I can look past that. It's still a bit annoying, and the treatment of Cinder is also a bit pricky as well. And as for the last third, it's actually I prefer the last third to the second third. I think that's my least favourite bit. There's some cool stuff in that. However, I think the last two chapters are rushed. I think there's a lot. I think they're quite short compared to the other chapters. They're quite short. As the last chapters of the first two parts were quite short anyway, but then they followed long penultimate chapters as well. Very long in the case of the first part. But part three's last two chapters just feel rushed. The story's rushing to end the story after Cinder's death and Karlok's being exterminated by the Daleks. The Doctor using Barusa to save the day, basically destroy the Daleks, but killing Barusa in the process. Sacrifice worth it. And to be fair, what Rassilon had done to Barusa was probably even worse. So you get to see some of Bruce, other versions of Bruce in the third part are in the Death Zone. There's some nice continuity references, Easter eggs and callbacks to both classic and upcoming new series stories. But upcoming in terms of the story taking place chronologically. The final act just feels a little bit rushed. The Doctor manages to save the universe by using Bruiser, but it feels a little bit rushed and a bit over too soon. And then the last chapter is just him on Mordox trying to find Cinder's family's graves and bury Cinder with them. And then just him deciding enough. Everyone's crossed the Daleks and the Time Lords have crossed the line. Enough is enough. Time to use the moment. And the events of the End of Time Part 2 probably also helped to determine his mindset onto that just before he met the moment consciousness, aka Bad Wolf Girl, in Day of the Doctor. I see Bad Wolf Girl, the Bad Wolf taking the form of Rose. So basically the events of the Day of the Doctor between the fall of Arcadia and just before he used the moment is probably when the End of Time Part 2 took place. Probably, or just before Day of the Doctor was just afterwards. Either way, the Doctor had to use the moment to stop the Time Lords becoming even worse. And I think End of Time Part 2 does show a bit of what the book does, so maybe this took some inspiration from that and then ran with it. And I'm not sure whether the audios or the comics also do this kind of thing, where they present the Time Lords as just as bad, or even worse. I mean, Night of the Doctor does say that there's hardly a difference anymore. So maybe they have been playing around with it a bit. But on the whole, Engines of War is a interesting, mostly enjoyable and fun War Doctor novel. I do not think the second part, the Gallifrey stuff, is that particularly great, but it does show some of the character development of the Time Lords. And I think the final two chapters are rushed. I think you could have had a little bit more time on the last two chapters on the Brewster stuff, and then the shorter stuff where the Doctor goes and buries Cinder. I just think it's a bit rushed, and they're kind of diverting themselves away from it a bit earlier on with the Death Zone stuff and stopping the tear being deployed into the eye and Karlak's coming at them. So there's a little bit of a diversion, and then they have to rush to finish it. But it's got some really interesting stuff. So I'm going to give Engines of War a 8 out of 10. It's a good read, but it's not anything spectacular. apart from the fact that it's the War Doctor's only novel. Again, maybe BBC Books don't have the license to release any more War Doctor stories, and the only people who seem to have the license besides the BBC are whoever do the comic strips. The comics that they do. I think Titan, and also Doctor Who magazine at one time. But Big Finish and BBC Books don't seem to be able to have or BBC Audio with the audio version, or audio book version, don't seem to have the rights to do any more War Doctor stories. That's odd. Personally, I would like to see a bit more War Doctor because he doesn't have many adventures. Like the 8th Doctor, he ought to be getting more expanded media material. But apart from the comics, there's very little of that. And with Big Finish, they don't have the license to the character anymore, only for those 12 audios in those 4 box sets. And as for the books, I don't know what the excuse is, and why they aren't allowed to have the licenses to continue with more stories. In Big Finish's case, it would have to be with another actor, or audiobooks like Short Trips or something. But otherwise, I don't get why the license wouldn't be allowed to be used on War Doctor stories. Is it because John Hurt's not around anymore? Is it just because I'm not sure what the issue is. And if with novels, that doesn't matter anymore. You just need pictures. You just need to use some pictures of him. The audios use pictures of Doctors 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8 that look younger, especially 4, 5, 6, and 7. Like, they were taken from the 70s, 80s. It's in the 70s, 80s. Yet, the actors themselves look a lot older. So, don't see what So, yeah, certainly with the books, there isn't an excuse not to have any more. But this is the one and only War Doctor story. And, I'm glad I managed to get it. I managed to get this story. So I wanted to have more War Doctor, and I want to get those audios as well. But I'll have to get more money. Nice bun. They are available in a bundle, so that's cool. Slightly cheaper. And I'd want to get the CDs and downloads, by the way. Downloads come free with the purchases online on the website, so cool. But yeah, there isn't enough War Doctor out there, except in the comics, which I don't really get. But there ought to be more War Doctor books at least, even if you're not going to let Big Finish do any more audios with him, which you should do in the future. You should. I've heard they're okay, but Big Finish usually does a great job anyway. And from the ones that I've heard, they've done a really great job. Maybe I should do some reviews of those in the future. I've definitely done some for the Universals, and some are coming up. But anyway, so that's enough from me. But Engines of War, great book. Pick up the book or the audiobook to listen to. Good read or good listen. But that's about it you're going to get from the War Doctor, at least in book/audiobook form. And those 12 Big Finish audios in those 4 box sets in audio drama, audio play, or radio play form. And everything else, besides the TV episodes, you're only going to have the comics. That's about it for the War Doctor. It's very scarce, considering it was introduced in 2013. Within under 5.5 years, almost. 6 years, if we're going to say from the name of the Doctor. From nearly 6 years, he hasn't had that much expanded material outside of the comics. And I find that odd. Considering the 8th Doctor had loads of books and loads of audios. Books since 1997 with the 8 Doctors, and audios from 2001 starting with Storm Warning. But yeah, he's had loads of adventures, as well as the comic strips and comic books, starting with whatever Doctor Who magazine comic strip he started with. But War Doctor, he's had one Doctor Who magazine comic strip, and to be honest, that was part of a 12th Doctor one, to be honest. He's had one novel, 12 Big Finish audios, part of 4 box sets, and several comics, several Titan comics. But besides the Titan comics, that's about it, outside of the TV episodes. So, I don't know. So, yeah, I'd hope to see more War Doctor stuff in the future. That isn't just the comics. Okay? So, maybe another novel down the line, possibly, guys? Maybe in 2023 for the 10th anniversary of the Day of the Doctor? possibly? Come on. Whoever's restricting these rights really needs to wake up. They really got to let other people write more War Doctor stories. I know it's not the easiest. He's not the easiest Doctor to write for. It's not the easiest time period to write for. It's not like the other Doctors where you can write any time, any place with any other character. But you know, the thing with the Time War is that you can play with the ideas that's been set down and just play around with it. This one does. This one certainly plays around with them. The audios definitely do. I've heard that. Or box set 2 onwards definitely plays with some of those aspects. Time War ones with the 8th Doctor probably do as well. Prequel ones with the 8th Doctor probably do as well. And the War Master and the Gallifrey War Time War box sets probably. I haven't heard any of them, but they still play around with the ideas. So it's still feasibly possible. It's difficult, but it's not impossible. It's doable. So I say let's have some more War Doctor stories up in the not too distant future, people. So that, yeah, and maybe, you know what? Maybe some people may even learn to love him. Maybe not make them their favourite Doctor, but they might not have him as their least favourite if they include expanded media into the overall folds and not just the TV episodes or TV and audio or TV and book or TV and comic or whatever, just everything. For me, if I was just going by TV adventures, he probably would be my least favourite, but in expanded media included, I think he's probably still lowest, but I have to listen to the audios. I'll actually get to listen to John Hurt's voice as opposed to trying my hardest to reimagine it in my head, only to promptly fail quite a few times. And one of the other ones, or just somebody else, just pops in. Anyway, I've rambled long enough about this, but it's a good book. Enjoyable, really enjoyable, but not perfect. And, yeah, but it's the only one we're going to have to War Doctor. So I say, let's go ahead and write another one. I'd do it if you pay me, pay me £100. Actually, pay me 84 so I can buy that big finish bundle of the War Doctor stories. And yeah, we're cool. So 84. Actually, make it 100 just in case. So give me £100 and let me buy those 8th War Doctor audios, and I'll write the next novel. Yeah, in fact, I'll just write. I would even write the next novel for free if you wanted. But oh well. But anyway, that's it from Engines of War review and my War Doctor not being in very much expanded media rant, and that he should be. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. Goodbye. Don't forget to click below to subscribe to the official Nicholas Payne Retro YouTube channel. What is it called? So, oh shit.